Hey, my name's Cole McRae, and this is Beyond Keywords, the advanced digital marketing podcast.
Beyond Keywords.
The title of this episode is a bit weird, I know, the hide and seek thing in $1 Million Game of Where's Waldo. It sounds like I'm going a little bit off my rocker, and I understand, but it will make sense, I promise. This episode is easy for me to do because this is something that's so incredibly important to me and kind of bounces off the previous episodes. So the last episode, I was talking about how I prefer to market to people instead of keywords. Then I went into various ways I do that and what that means to me. But I want to get into depth on some of the things I do to actually accomplish that. So first of all, when I say people instead of keywords or placements, and that was the invention of the whole name of this podcast. One of the main ways I go about doing that is by looking at numbers in a very different way from when I got into this industry. You see, instead of getting in front of as many people as possible, I learned that it's more important to get in front of the right people. When I first started in this industry, it was all about volume. It was about getting as many impressions as possible so I can get those clicks and turn them into conversions. The more clicks I get, especially at a low price, the better, because then I could get results. To be honest, I didn't even have conversion tracking when I very first started. Conversion tracking was this amazing new thing at one point, but that's neither here nor there. And it was just about millions. Could I get 1 million clicks? Because if I could get that, I could probably sell a lot, and it was pretty epic. But in reality, what I learned later in my career is that even if I got 1 million impressions, if none of them ended up buying anything, it meant nothing. If I could just get 3 people by spending a bit more or doing something different to buy something, that was worth a hell of a lot more than getting 1 million people to look at my ad. So this episode, I'm going to focus on just how to get in front of the right people. I hinted at some of the strategies last time, but this time, we're getting into the gory details. And I hope you're into that. Because if not, I'm going to completely change how I do this entire podcast because there's a lot of gory details I want to go over. So, let's jump into things. The first one I want to talk about is Mr. Robot Voice. He's going to say NPS. Hopefully. Or I'll just leave this part in. NPS. Or Net Promoter Score. As a marketer, you've probably heard those 3 letters thrown around enough to make you sick. So first, I'm going to give a very quick overview of what they mean. So if you already know what they mean, maybe fast forward a little bit or something, but just a quick refresher maybe if you know it. So Net Promoter Score is basically, well, as it is a score, it's basically a number that a person can have attached to them. That's the way I look at it, which I know is different than others. And that number is between 0 and 10, I believe. Or it could be 1 and 10. Probably 1 and 10. No, 0. 0 and 10. And it's attached to a question. That question can have some variations, but it kind of boils down to a very simple one. From 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our services to a friend? Most marketers, their first thought is, okay, that's awesome because I can get referrals. And referrals are awesome. Also, what's the word for it? Voice. When people tell their friends about it, it costs them nothing and it gets you amazing sales that way because people trust what their friends say. And that's incredibly important. And yes, that was one of the main features of this because that's a fantastic thing. And the higher the Net Promoter Score overall that you have, if you average it out, well, that means you're doing well. You're going to have a lot of people out there talking about your brand in a positive way, and that's awesome. But I think you could take that a whole lot further. So NPS is generally collected as a very basic data point. So a lot of the time, companies will even do like a survey monkey thing. They'll send out this SurveyMonkey, and one of the questions will be that Net Promoter Score question. And then they'll get that information, and then they'll have the answers there, and they can say, hey, overall, our average NPS is X, whatever it is. To be honest, I don't really care that much. It probably matters especially if you're a startup or an entrepreneur and you're looking for funding in that. Having a high Net Promoter Score means people love your brand, and that's a very positive thing. It's also a show of your brand and the strength of that, so that's also positive. But me, well, I want to circle back to actually using this in a way for your marketing, and not just the most obvious way that you first popped into your mind was, hey, we can advertise our Net Promoter Score on our ads. Yeah, you can, I guess, but the average person doesn't care. They don't know what NPS means. It's meaningless. NPS is a B2B term, so maybe you could use it in B2B advertising. That's totally cool. I have to check something. No, it looks like you guys didn't hear me bump my mic there. That's a good thing. I bought this little elastic thing that protects it. So where was I? NPS. So that's one way you could use NPS, and that's whatever. I don't personally care. What I think you should do is connect that NPS to each individual customer. So instead of doing something like SurveyMonkey or like just a basic data collection point, have that plugged into their Google Analytics ID. Have NPS, like one of the ways, the most common way is asking via email, and then you have links in that email. So when they click a number, you know their email address, you know the score now, take that score, push it into Google Analytics attached to their GAID. Do that for as many people as possible. Then you've got an audience of all these people based on their NPS. You could build an audience of people that are high NPS and then shoot your referral emails to those people. Hey, you said you were highly likely to... Why do I use that voice? It's an annoying voice. Hey, you said you're highly likely to share our business to a friend. Why don't you? Maybe you can get X or whatever referral bonus you have. But that's just one thing. I want to take that way further. Build several audiences. First, build an audience of what's called promoters. These are the people that are high on the spectrum. You can find the math. Maybe I'll link to it in the blog post where I talk about this podcast. Find the math and make an audience for promoters, push it into your DMP, or just have it in analytics that gets pushed to your AdWords and DoubleClick, whatever way you want to set that up. It's going to build a lookalike audience based on this. When you have a lookalike audience of promoters, you can get more promoters, which means you get more word of mouth. That's the word that I was looking for before. More word of mouth advertising, which is free and amazing for you. When you connect this high NPS or promoters audience, lookalike audience, with the one I talked about in the last episode, the people who have high conversions or whatever, you get an amazing audience. You could also do a lot with this. One of the things I remember doing when I worked for Aquamobile is people who gave us, who are good customers of ours, so one of the things being NPS, we actually gave them special offers, or we gave them a little treat. Send them a cookie or something. Send them a handwritten note for the really high ones, because those people are then going to continue promoting your brand. But back to having it connected and building the audience, because that's what I think really important here. I had something I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. Oh, so the other audience that you want to build is the people with the low NPS score. These are people who give you a 1 or give you a 3 or even a 5 or 6, which, yes, I know is actually low. But maybe keep it, the numbers actually lower if you're going to do what I'm about to do. So have the 1s through 4s or whatever, make that a separate audience. Push it into your DMP or analytics, whatever, and use that as a suppression technique, which I'm going to talk about a lot more in the exclusion podcast that I alluded to earlier. Suppression means, well, there's one of two things. You could either make them a negative audience, so you could make a negative based on these people. They've already given you a low NPS. Why do you want to advertise to them? Their lookalike audiences can be negative audiences. Or you could do it as just a negative bid modifier. So if you're doing it in AdWords, which I know I talk to death, but it's kind of an important platform, you could simply do a negative 20% bid modifier to people who look like people who have a low NPS in your that you found. This means you could focus on people who are going to give a higher NPS and not people who are going to have a lower NPS. You get a lot more word of mouth, which gets you better return in general. Let's reverse a little and focus on something that isn't NPS, because I've said those 3 letters way too much. So a lot of marketers do some of the above that I just mentioned, but do it based on sales. They're able to create a conversion at the sale point and then do optimizing and the like to that. And that's awesome. Someone clicks on one of your ads, they go through, they purchase a product, you say, boom, that person is a sale, you build a lookalike audience, and then you have lookalike audience based on sales, and that is fantastic and really, really powerful. And I highly recommend do that if you can. But I want to take that to a new level. You need to look at two things. The first, margin. Not just sales, not just revenue. Look at the actual margin you're making. So some people will point at something like return on ad spend, and yeah, return on ad spend can work, but what about the cost of the product itself? It's not built into your return on ad spend. Build that cost in, and you could do that with analytics if possible, or you could push it into some other analytics system. You can have a custom dimension that's hooked into that customer's ID. So if you have something like a CMS, it makes a lot of this way easier. But if you have some kind of custom customer ID for every person that purchases something, you can then connect the cost of the item, which is pushed, and then subtract the revenue they made. So you can have custom dimension for cost, and then have a custom dimension for revenue, or just use revenue. It's a normal e-commerce stuff. And then you can actually subtract the cost of the item from the e-commerce and then have your margin. And then anyone who has a margin above X, build the audiences for, like I mentioned above or before. I say above because I got a whole bunch of notes I'm scrolling through here and they're all above. You can then build the lookalike audiences or normal audiences for them to try to get them to return and buy more stuff, all that kind of stuff. So knowing this, yeah, priority channels, creating lookalikes. I'm going to delete this part. Note from future editor Cole. I left it in. So, the other thing I promised in my last episode is I would tell you how I find where my audiences are. That's coming soon. Along with margin, always make sure to include the lifetime value of the customer. If you're using the e-commerce and analytics, that's built right in. And build the audiences based on a lifetime value. So if you don't know what lifetime value is, basically you take the margin and multiply it by all the things they buy. So a customer might buy something from your e-commerce store and then come back later and buy something else, a TV, and then they come buy cables for it. But also it could be something like they come buy one product and then they like the service and then we'll look at your store for another product and buy something. So you actually, a customer is worth a lot more than just that single purchase to you. You know they'll keep coming back. Or you have them in the database and they're worthwhile to you in other ways because they're in your database now. So make sure you use lifetime value and margin rather than just revenue or sales, because going down further in the funnel that way, building these audiences will get you better results overall in general. How do you find where your customers are? Well, hey, Mr. Robot Voice, how about you tell me the history thing?
Let's go back in time.
There we go. Let's go back in time. So companies used to have to do a huge amount of research to figure out where their target personas, remember, I talked about that in the last episode, so where those people hang out and what they like to do. This could cost millions of dollars, take massive amounts of time, and you know what? It wasn't that effective, to be honest. A lot of the time, they were just outright wrong. There was no way to really guarantee it, but we have technology now. Things have gotten a million times better. So all that stuff I just said above, about using lifetime value, about using NPS, about using margin, take those audiences, smoosh them all together into one really powerful, these are your customers audience, and then push that into a DSP or just your display network. And then monitor what placements pop up. Because you're using the audience, you'll see where they are. And you'll see all these huge list of websites. And you'll see which ones get more people. So you'll have a list organized by popularity of where your best customers hang out. And it's not going to cost you much, especially if you don't try to get conversions or clicks or anything from them. And you just do it as a brand awareness campaign. What you do with that list, completely up to you. Maybe head over to one of those websites and offer them an affiliate deal so you don't have to pay advertising to them and they could just get a kickback for every sale they give you. Or maybe you pay for advertising on those sites more outside of that audience. Put a lot of lookalikes and use those placements to make it even more efficient for you. Maybe increase your bids on those specific sites so you get better results because you know those are the sites that are getting you your lifetime value customers. Next, it's time to talk about something that I consider really fun. And I hinted at it. The last episode, we talked a bunch about excluding people. It was the scary thing you do not want to do, especially if you're a small company. Excluding people means you are sending people away. They could not be buying your product, and that's never a good thing, except when it is. So this section of the podcast I'm calling Only Let the Cool Kids In. That's stupid, right? Yeah, that's stupid. But one of the easiest ways to save an insane amount of money with your advertising is to do exclusions, or what might be a better term is audience suppression. This is something that's been around for quite some time. Actually, before even the digital age, it was something you did when you were doing direct mail. But I want to focus on digital because that's kind of who I am and what I do. So audience suppression can start simple, but the more you do it, the better your overall results can get. So let's start with the most simple example, which I think illustrates what I mean by audience suppression quite well. So you go to a website and you purchase a product. Doesn't matter the website, doesn't matter the product. If it's a popular website, the kind of website that maybe does, dynamic remarketing, as soon as you leave that site and start browsing around to other websites, you're followed around by ads for the product you just purchased. And that is frustrating and annoying. The worst part, though, is when they advertise a price. Because you're now seeing an ad for a product you just purchased, and a lot of the time, they offer a lower price. Or they offer some kind of exclusive to people who see that ad. And it's very, very, very annoying. It also means they're paying for the ads to annoy you. And there's a possibility your company is doing that right now. So that's why you got to do audience suppression. It's an old tactic to offer a lower price to customers when they leave their site. A lot of the time, if you left something in a grocery cart, or if you looked at a product and then left, they would email you with a lower price because that was a fantastic way to get you to actually purchase the product. So there's a simple rule where if someone makes a purchase, add them to a negative audience. You're probably nodding along, thinking exactly that. Okay, I have a negative audience for those who make a purchase. Cool. And you're right. That's what I'm getting at. It's pretty easy. But personally, I would call that crawling. That's the crawling section of this device. It helps an insane amount, but it's really just the beginning. My first thought is, once you remove ads for the product they just saw, like if you're doing dynamic retargeting, is that you can use that as a chance to do cross-selling. If they see your ad, remove them from an ad if they buy a product, remove them from an ad for that product, we'll put them in ads for the similar to stuff. Like Amazon has users have also purchased section. They should be advertising that stuff to you after you've made that purchase so that you might buy the stuff that goes with it. The accessories, a lot of the time it is, but it could also just be something similar to it. So that's one thing right there. The next one is people who are annoyed with you. Back to audience suppression. You have a customer service page. And I'm not saying right away you might be thinking, oh, okay, so I do a negative audience people who visit your customer service page. No, obviously not. But if they click the actual help button and send an email, maybe do it for that. If they start a live chat in your customer service, yeah, that should be a negative audience in your advertising. So you're not advertising to someone who's annoyed with a product, especially if they go to a product page to find customer service for that product. Don't start advertising that product to them as soon as they leave. If someone is annoyed enough to require customer service, your ads are probably going to hurt with them rather than help. Now, another interesting, unique idea might be to create a lookalike audience of those people and then do a slight negative bid. Because the type of person who needs customer service, especially when you're looking at scale, might not be the type of customer you want. You want to do less customer service overall.
I don't know why.
Beyond keyword.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cole McRae. This was Beyond Keywords, the Advanced Digital Marketing Podcast. Listen again for more episodes. It's all available at colemcrae.com or, of course, in your favorite podcasting apps such as iTunes or Podcast. No, not Podcast. Pocket Cast. That's one I use. Or whatever system you want to use. See you next time. Bye.
Don't you go there, don't you try to show.